Did you ask for more Japanese knife content? And if you did, I'm listening, so we're going to be doing a lot more Japanese knives and whetstone content. And we're going to be starting off with this Syosaku 240mm Gyuto. Now, if you haven't already, please consider supporting the channel by hitting that like and subscribe button. Now, quick disclaimer, Syosaku did send me this knife completely free of charge. However, they're not paying me for this video, and they understand that all of my feedback and reviews are 100% honest. And please excuse my Japanese pronunciation. If I butcher something, please let me know in the comments below on how to properly pronounce it. And as always, this is a first impression video. We're going to come back here in 6 months to see how this baby holds up. If you've not heard of Syosaku before, Syosaku was started in 2017 by Toshi Sakai, and it is a company that sells urushi plates and Japanese knives based out of Tokyo. So they reached out to me to see whether or not I wanted to review one of their knives, and they sent over this hammered 46-layer Damascus VG10 240mm Gyuto. Holy smokes, that was a mouthful. Okay, so anyhow, let's go ahead and dive straight into the specs. Okay, so as stated before, this is a 240mm long knife. And right here at the heel, the knife is about 51 millimeters tall, precisely 50.72 millimeters. And the spine thickness right here at the heel is 1.66 millimeters. So this is a very thin knife, which is really nice. Now all this leads down to this D-shaped handle right here. This is a D-shaped Y handle made out of magnolia wood and an oxhorn ferrule. And it has a hidden tang construction. Okay, don't run off yet, because I know some of you guys are just like, hey, if it's not full tang, it's a no-go. Well, the truth of the matter is, a well-constructed, well-fitted hidden tang kitchen knife, especially in the kitchen setting, a hidden tang construction can be just as robust as a full tang construction. Because, let's be honest, guys, in the kitchen setting, you're not going to be really banging this knife around like you would in like an outdoor setting. Even let's take it to an outdoor setting for a lot of the bushcraft guys and outdoorsy type guys. There are a lot of those guys who swear by Mora knives. And Mora knives are also constructed of a hidden tang construction. Now, a little bit more on this handle. This handle is definitely one of the larger handles out of a 240mm knife. I actually have several other 240mm Gyutos that I'm going to be reviewing that also has Y handles. It is not a D-shaped handle. Those are traditional octagonal handles. This is actually the largest of all of the handles that I have on the other 240 knives. So for those of you guys who like a larger handle, this will be a very good choice for you. And also, I gotta say, this is my first D-shaped handle, and this D-shaped handle is very comfortable on the hands. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the type of steel that this knife is made out of. First, this knife is made out of a sandmine construction with a VG10 core and a stainless steel Damascus cladding. Now, if you're not familiar with VG10, VG10 is basically the Japanese gold standard of cutlery stainless steel. This knife is also heat treated to about 60 to 62 Rockwell hardness. Now, with all this being said, you might notice that there are some similar VG10 knives being sold under Sakai Takayuki, Tsunehisa, or Kikusui. Now, I'm not sure if this is the case with the Syosaku knives, because when I spoke to them, they said that all of their knives are handmade in Sakai. But it is a very common practice in Japan for a lot of these companies or a lot of these brands to buy pre-made knives, brand them, and sell them under their own company name. Next, let's go ahead and move on to the fit and finish. Now let's check for blade straightness. Blade is very nice and straight, which was expected from Japanese craftsmanship. Yeah, very, very nice and straight. Now let's take a look at the blade's finish. Blade's finish is very nice. I really, really dig this hammered mark, the sushimi finish, or the sushimi or sushimi. I'm not sure. Please let me know down below how to properly pronounce it. But the hammered finish plus the Damascus, just a mixture finish, I really, really dig that, because I love kind of like this mixed media that they have going on here. And then also it leads down to this near mirror polish edge that it has. So it's really, really cool. Now, there are a few things that I'm noticing with this knife that other people might not care or notice, but it is the scratch pattern on the edge from sharpening. That the scratch pattern from sharpening is fairly visible. So there's that. And that's these hyper detail is kind of what sets a good knife maker versus a great or legendary knife maker. Next thing I noticed, on one side of the blade, these horizontal, like very light scratch marks on them. After kind of investigating a little bit, playing detective, I know what caused those scratch marks. And it is actually the plastic sleeve that they shipped it in. Their plastic sleeve is smooth on one side, but on the other side, on the inside, is this texture. And I think pulling the knife in and out of this sleeve, this texture inside, is actually causing that really light scratch mark in it. Next, let's go ahead and take a look at the spine and choil. So the spine is not crowned and the choil is not rounded off either. But neither of them are sharp enough to cause any sort of discomfort. But at this price point, I definitely like to see a little bit more attention and detail paid to these areas, because that's kind of what can set them apart from their competitors. But I also know that a lot of Japanese knives don't come with this feature because the pinch grip is actually not very common in Japan. Now lastly, let's go ahead and take a look at the fit and finish of the handle. So the fit and finish of the handle is very comfortable. Like I said, it is on the larger side, so for those of you guys who have large hands, you might prefer this knife. The oxhorn furrow is nice and smooth, nice and polished. The wood is nice and smooth. You can't feel any kind of raised grain on it at all. The knife is fitted in there nice and centered. And really the only feedback I would have for this handle is the 𝐸𝐄𝐋𝐏. And let me preface this by saying I am not a Y handle expert or any kind of knife making guru or anything like that, okay? This is just from my personal experience handling other Japanese knives with Y handles fitted to them. So even though the knife is fitted nice and centered into the Y handle, but because the 𝐸𝐿 is drilled off-centered and a little too large, that you can see that on one side of the blade, it has a lot more space and a lot more beeswax filled into it. But this knife is in there nice and tight. It's not any sort of structural integrity issue. So I don't expect this to be any sort of problem outside of just fit and finish. Next, let's go ahead and take a look at the grind and the profile of the knife. So let's start with actually the profile of the knife. The profile is a very traditional Gyuto profile, which I like a lot. It has a much flatter profile in comparison to your Western chef knife. So the reason behind this flatter profile is because of the cooking style that Japanese people have. They actually don't use as much rock cuts. They use a lot more slicing and push cuts in Japanese cooking. Next, let's go ahead and take a look at the grind. So the grind of this knife is very nice and thin. I'll actually get a closer up angle so you can see. It's very gradual, very thin, and I'm actually really looking forward to cutting with this knife. I don't expect any kind of wedging issues with how thin this knife is, but the only way we can tell is with a cut test. So let's get cutting. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, as always, is a standing paper cut test, which I am predicting that this knife is not going to have any issue passing this test because it's nice and thin. And I gotta tell you, I felt this edge, and in comparison to a VG10 knife that I have reviewed before, that this edge comes a lot more aggressive and a lot more sharp in comparison to the other knife. Oh, such a clean edge out of the box. So clean. I mean, look at this, guys. Wow. That is such a clean edge. I'm going to try this again because that was just really fun. Oh, here it goes. Wow. Now that feels nice. That is so fun to do. Alright. The test you guys hate. The tomato test. I have to do it because the tomato test, for a lot of people, they say, oh, the tomato test doesn't tell sharpness. To me it does, because I've sharpened knives and I have had knives that came out of the box brand new they can't pass this test. So this kind of gives me a gauge on telling how sharp this knife is out of the box and how well the edge geometry is. Because if you have a thick knife that has a sharp edge, it's not going to do it. So oh, so smooth. And I gotta tell ya, this is actually harder to do on this Asahi cutting board, because this Asahi cutting board doesn't grip on to a wet tomato like a wooden cutting board, like a dry wooden cutting board would. Look at that. That is paper thin. Oh, that is so fun to do. Oh, look at that, guys. I mean, no effort whatsoever. Just pops it right off at the top. Look at that. That was fun to do. Next, the carat test. As you guys know, I love the carat test because the carat test tells you a lot about the grind geometry, how well the blade actually performs and cuts. Because for a knife that has too thick of an edge or too thick of a knife, it starts wedging. Okay? And it cracks. Now the only problem I see is that a little bit of food release issue that I see, but not a huge issue, as you guys can see. No wedging, no snapping, no cracking. And I gotta tell you, the sound of cutting this carrot, you can just hear how crisp it's cutting through the carrot. Okay, so as you guys can see, the knife cuts really, really well. And like I said previously, this VG10, specifically this one, in comparison to the several VG10 knives that I've reviewed and unboxed in the past, this is definitely the sharpest VG10 knife that I've had to date. So it is a really, really pleasant surprise. And yeah, the knife performs really well, as you guys can see. So for those of you guys who are interested in getting one of these knives, I'll link everything down below so you guys can check it out. And this wraps up our video for the week of the Syosaku 240mm Gyuto. Thank you, Syosaku, again for sending the knife over for us to review. And for those of you guys who are watching, if you guys like this video, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It would mean the world to me. It help me support all this madness. And I will see you guys next week. Bye.